Well, hello and welcome to this week's Clarity Parents Chat. The topic we are going to discuss today is balancing act, living a professional life and raising small children. My name is Gerard Mijon with the Clarity Child Guidance Center, and we look forward to an engaging conversation with our guest speaker, Jessica Knudsen, Clarity's president and CEO. This talk is a production of Clarity Child Guidance Center, a nonprofit treatment center solely dedicated to helping children 3 to 17 with their mental health. Clarity is located in the San Antonio Medical Center and provides inpatient and outpatient services to several thousand of children every year. You can read more about the center at claritycgc.org and about children's mental health on our prevention and education website, oneinfiveminds.org. Before we start, a few technical details. The webinar will end at 11:30, including a 10-minute Q&A at the end. This talk is recorded, but none of the names of the attendees will show in the recording to protect your privacy. That's also why we are not taking live questions. However, if you have a question for Jessica, we invite you to post them at any time in the chat space during the talk. Of course, this event is purely educational and it's by no means an attempt to provide online counseling. Jessica Knudsen is an LCSW, and she was named president and CEO of Clarity Child Guidance Center in February 2019. She joined Clarity CGC from Holy Hill Hospital, one of North Carolina's leading psychiatric and addiction treatment facilities for children and adults, where she acted in a dual role as a COO and Director of Risk Management and Performance Improvement. Jessica received her Master's of Science in Social Work from University of Texas at Austin and her BS in Psychology from University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. She received her license in Clinical Social Work from the state of North Carolina. Prior to joining the Holy Hill team, she held roles in therapy and directorial positions at other behavioral health facilities. Jessica, welcome.
Thank you, Gerard. I'm very happy to be here today.
Well, it's an honor to have you, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. So the first question we have is this situation that we're talking about is obviously very personal and relevant to you as a mother of two and a CEO of a nonprofit hospital. Could you share a bit about your own background in that regard?
Sure, I'd be happy to. And when this topic was suggested, I jumped on it because this is really my daily life. This is what I try to achieve every day. I know we're going to be talking about the concept of work-life balance, but there's been a lot of information in the media recently, and I did not come up with this phrase, of shifting to harmony. Is balance really achievable? And that's partly what I'll talk about today. Is it's more of that concept of harmony rather than a balance. I think I also want to just kind of preface all of this with knowing that I am in a very privileged and lucky position because as the CEO of an agency, I can set the tone to a large extent and create a true family first environment for myself and for my team. That is not the case for everyone. And that wasn't the case at my previous place of employment. It was kind of family first on paper, but I was very torn between my responsibilities at the hospital and my responsibilities to my family. And it did create a lot of daily stress on how to balance that. So I think part of me knew really get to the point where my kids could thrive and I could thrive, I had to find a different environment that would allow for that. So I think, that's something I just encourage everyone to do is to really look at it. If you do have parameters that you can't meet in that work environment, is it time to look for something? And again, I am extremely fortunate that I can, set that tone for my team. And we do have a lot of young parents on our team, staff. I think all of them have kids under the age of 10. And so it's kind of something that's a priority for all of us. And we're a children's mental health facility. So it's on the forefront of everyone's mind to make sure we're taking care of the kids in our own life in addition to the kids here at Clarity.
Absolutely. Well, and thank you for that. This is so important to really preface that because not everyone in this situation. However, so in your personal situation, you have two young children, right?
I do.
And can you tell a little bit about their or their how they are and?
So I have 3-year-old boy-girl twins. As you mentioned, I'm a fairly recent transplant from North Carolina.
Yeah.
18 months when we moved, 1,500 miles, along with two 70-pound dogs and a husband in tow, which is not maybe the brightest time to do that kind of transition. But again, I think it was trying to find that work harmony that we so needed as a family.
Mm-hmm.
They do go to childcare. They're in a Spanish immersion school here in town. We've been very fortunate that program has stayed open throughout the pandemic, which again, I know I'm very fortunate, and lots of folks are not in that set of circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
But they've been able to go and have some routine and structure throughout of this. They, are probably like every other child impacted by the current pandemic. We're doing our best to explain it to them in terms they understand as 3-year-olds and put it into context for them. But, putting all of that into context, they're still doing really well.
Yeah, that sounds great. And as you said, you've been through a lot of major changes in the past 2 years. But one big change you probably went through even before that is when you had your children. And can you describe kind of the personal changes that parents experience when they have children? It's a big shift.
It was huge. And I don't think I knew going into it exactly how huge it would be. I was very career focused for a long time. I had been at my previous facility for about 10 years. Mm-hmm. And it was a 285-bed hospital. It was very busy. And I was a workaholic. I really was. I was working 12, 13, 14-hour days, coming in on weekends. And, when I got pregnant and we found out it was twins, I clicked, that's not going to work. There's no way I can continue at that rate. And it was, a lot of conversations with my employer that I'm not going to be able to do that. So if that's the expectation, we need to talk about that now. And luckily I had a very supportive boss that, even though there were high expectations for performance, knew I was going to have to leave at 5 and maybe do some work at home, those type of things to continue to meet the expectations. And the other big difference is your brain is always split. Mm-hmm. It's never in one place at one time. Right. You're constantly struggling between, I have to get to that meeting, but my kids have a presentation this afternoon. And so that's a brand new feeling of even when you're trying to be as present as possible, there's always a tug
right.
of kind of wanting to be in the other place.
Yeah. And that's an important, just being aware of that this is happening and you can still function, but there's a change that you need to be aware of and function with it. Now, you have a lot of responsibilities as a CEO, but regardless of the job, it takes a lot of our energies and mind space to, like you said, to have children. Why is it important to shift effectively from one role to the other, and what can help in that regard? So shifting from the mom or the dad to the employee or leader that we're called to be.
Well, I have to admit, Gerard, this is not something I'm always good at. It is, and especially in my line of work, because there are after hours things that I sometimes get called into, and weekend things depending on what's going on at the hospital. But what I do try to do is carve out some time that is completely dedicated, because especially kids as they get older, they need that one-on-one attention. And they need that connection and that communication. And so making sure, even if it's only for 5 or 10 minutes a day, and I tend to do this at bedtime with my kids, we just talk. And my phone's not in the room. There's no other distraction. It's just a conversation, because if I can't always be there with the quantity of time. So it's really making sure that the quality is rich and it fills their needs. But again, I'm not always good at that. My team, I think, has kind of learned I'm not available from 6:30 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. because that's kind of bedtime and baths and meal times. But if there's a crisis, I'm still going to have to pick up that phone. So as much as I try to provide that time so I can be completely present with them, and that's why I said balance is sometimes difficult. It's
Right.
that I'm going to have maybe one night that I get pulled away, but I've got 6 where I can preserve that routine and that dedication to the kids.
It's almost like you commit to something and you do your best at it, and you know that every time you do it, you build this connection. You build towards the something a strong connection. Even when you miss it, you can still function. And it's interesting. I was talking to a friend who has a family, and he's very busy as well. And he said, like at night, like I wanna, it's sometimes you just wanna go read something, and it's like, but this is the best time. And he has teenage kids, right? Best time sometimes you get this extra, you do the extra effort to just hang out with your daughter or your son, and you'll hear something that you'd never hear otherwise, maybe, right? It's this kind of it's a long-term building of a connection. I think is really important. Now, we learn more and more about mindfulness, active listening, and being present. You mentioned that being present as a way to raise confident kids. Can you comment on that a little bit and what that looks like?
So it is a little bit of what I alluded to, that I want to make sure my kids are heard. That they're 3, but they're still 3.5, but they're communicative, and they have a lot of ideas, and they have a lot of opinions, and so making sure that they know that I'm listening and really hearing them. I can't do that when I'm on my phone or on the computer or watching TV. It's got to be an all-in type of thing. But I think it's also important for them to see me taking care of my responsibilities, and when I've got a responsibility at work, that I'm doing the same thing. I'm giving the time and attention to that task, because what families that they have when they get older and what kind of parents they're going to become is directly related to what they see me doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
And so those little interactions do have a huge impact. The other thing tied into that is you have to give yourself a break if it doesn't go right, because it doesn't always go right. Believe me, I have many nights where that goes completely off the rails, and bath time takes an hour instead of 15 minutes, and my son doesn't want to go to sleep. And I think, especially being in the field that I'm in, I set a lot of really high expectations about what parenting was going to look like and how my kids were going to behave. And I've really learned part of being mindful and being present is also not beating myself up if things go wrong.
Sure.
Be the days I don't feed them a perfect meal, that I forget to take the form back to their childcare, and that's okay. As long as I'm kind of doing those basic things and I know they feel safe, I don't have to beat myself up for the things that go wrong.
I think that's really important what you're saying here, because we see whether it's on social media or we have these models, and we compare ourselves as parents, and it's so easy to get discouraged or angry because look, we can't do it perfectly, right? And so just giving ourselves a break, and as getting a sense of we're doing the most important part, and if it's imperfect, it's still gonna be okay, right? That's huge, huge. Now, and that will help you probably be present, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're thinking critically of yourself,
it takes you away. Yep,
that takes
absolutely.
you away, and so that's very, very powerful. Now, another difficulty for parents is to put in the same type of thinking and planning into raising their families and children that depend on their work, right? I mean, we're in work, you have systems and you have plans, and it's simply, it takes a lot of mental and physical energy to do that. So how would you advise parents to do about that? What would you advise them to do about that? Are there maybe some basic principles or approaches that you can suggest?
So I try to keep things as simple as possible, and that tied in with having as much structure and routine. I'm a recovering director of performance improvement, so my life is all about systems and
Yeah.
routines. Um, but that's partly what keeps me sane. So I think you have to, look at your own personality and your own routines. But it's as little as when we get home from school, we check the backpacks. The backpacks go right back in my car, so it's not scrambling to find them the next morning. The shoes go in a certain spot. That seems like little stuff, but when you're trying to kind of keep everything going in a forward direction, it does make a huge impact. So we're really big on those routines and those schedules. And then it goes back to what I said earlier: is being kind to yourself when that goes awry, because it will.
Hmm.
And that's what kids do.
Yeah.
They make your best laid plans um, and make their own plans.
Yeah, yeah. Well, and then in the bigger picture too, like you're having I mean, you're having your children in a bilingual school. I mean, you're very thoughtful, I'm sure, about your education principles and all. But do you have any advice for parents that where they can start with that if they may not have it? And you have education, you have probably good models, family models for that. How can families at different places in that area could go to get help with that?
So I wrote a blog for our website that was about kind of our experience with putting the kids back in school after the pandemic hit, and just what that experience was like. And one of the kind of tenets in that was the concept of being charitable, and not just in the sense of, obviously we want to be charitable and supporting nonprofits and those type of things, but being charitable with ourselves and with others.
Hmm.
So much judgment since the pandemic hit of the right way to parent, in terms of, do I send my kid to in-person school? Do I keep them home? Do I homeschool? Do I have to be there the entire time they're on Zoom? And there's no one size fits all model. And I think, that's why I try to not look at a lot of social media, because people are so judgmental. If
Hmm. Hmm.
you're sending your kid to in-person school, there are comments about, well, you don't care about their physical health. If you're keeping them home, you get comments that you don't care about their mental health. And I think you got to shut all that noise out and decide what's best for your child. I think parents know their kids, they know their family, they know their individual circumstances. And I'm just, I believe wholeheartedly that parents will design the plan that's best for their child.
Hmm. Hmm. Yes, that's. I want to remind our audience that they can post any question at any time in the chat box. So I appreciate if you have any questions, please. This is a good time to do it. Now, with COVID, there is another layer of challenges with kids home from school, possibly older parents at risk, and other concerns. What have you done to face these new challenges, and what could you encourage parents to do?
I think that every family has to conduct their own risk analysis and determine what level of risk they're willing to take. For example, in my family, I've got an 82-year-old father that lives in North Carolina. He hasn't seen his grandkids in going on 12 months, which is awful. And as much as we FaceTime, it's just not the same as being able to. Oh, sorry, my
That's okay. You're good.
light went out. As being able to see them in person and give them a hug. But when we talked it through, our risk analysis is, it's not worth it to risk my dad having to take 2 planes, potentially get exposed, or have my kids expose him because they are in childcare and happen. So as hard as that is, we're not going to see him over the holidays because our own personal risk analysis, it's just not worth the potential negative impact. So I think every family system has to do that and really determine what level of risk they're able to take safely.
Yeah, and thank you for, that's you set a model. Because we have to sacrifice really to this time, and that's very difficult. So how are the how do you feel like your children are understanding that when you have conversation with them?
So this has been a work in progress. Back in March when everything started happening, their childcare did stay open, and it was a very sudden. And I remember every detail of this. Probably everybody does for their own scenario, but it was the 13th. It was March 13th. We kind of got word that it was becoming an issue here, and there was potential shutdown orders, and so that was one of my most challenging times as a parent because I had a ton of responsibility here because we had to identify what our action plan was at the hospital. Do we send people home? Do we mask everyone? And there really wasn't a lot of good information. So that was extremely stressful, layered with, do I send the kids back to childcare? And what does that look like? I was in a circumstance where I really couldn't stay at home with them because of the responsibilities here. But that first day when I pulled up, because they changed the whole routine, you don't take them in the building anymore. You up and staff comes and gets them out of the car. Well, that first week, that first Monday, they were gowned, gloved, face shields, masks, and I had done my best to kind of prep the kids that things are going to look a little different. They actually took it in stride so much better than I did. They were not bothered at all. They became fascinated with the mask. I, on the other hand, cried all the way to work because it's so jarring to have the kids exposed to that and taken out of the car like that.
Yeah.
So that's gotten a little easier, and we have talked a lot more with them about the fact that there's a virus. That's why grandpa's not coming. They still go to their swimming lessons, but there are no stickers at swimming, and they know that's because of the virus, so they can't do those type of activities. So they're aware on a very kind of general level that things have changed because of the virus.
I think this is really powerful. What you just said is that it's almost like our kids can adjust maybe sometimes easier than we do. And for us, it's just this sense of like, we're gonna grieve and just let go. And that's a process. And so I think it goes back to what you were saying, being easy on ourselves in a way that taking care of ourselves. I have a question. How do you, from the audience, how do you suggest parents handle giving themselves a break when we know that our high school students will soon be applying to college? How would she compete with others if we give too much of a break right now? So it's just the parents who's like, sounds like there's a pressure there that, okay, my child needs to perform, right? And then at the same time, this idea of giving ourselves a break.
And that's a tough one because, school is so different now. And if you're a senior, those are pivotal times for the college application process. I think it's knowing your kid and knowing yourself to know where your wall is. We all have that wall where if we try to push through, it's actually counterproductive. If we're overly tired, if we just aren't feeling it that day, you do have to take a step back. And sometimes that's the best thing you can do because you can go back the next day refreshed and more able to hit it. It's hard to do, especially when you've got deadlines looming. But I think, probably every parent with a school-age child has been there at, 10 o'clock when it's trying to get through homework and everyone's in tears. You need to take a break. That's not the time you have a breakthrough with the assignment.
Right.
And you have to kind of step back, and if it's doing it the next morning, if it's talking to the teacher, but you can't force it, especially if people are stressed and overwhelmed.
Yeah. And having older children who've gone through college too, there's a point where we also have to let them take initiative and responsibility. And that's what's going to happen in college too, right? They're going to have to be. We won't be able to watch what they're doing every day. But it's hard. That's a part of, I think, letting go of our ability to really get our kids forward. Another question is, how do we learn to forgive ourselves? The person was asking, it's very hard it doesn't seem like a natural thing, right, to be forgiving. And so how do we learn to do it and to take it one step further, approach our kids to apologize for our mistakes in dealing with them? Wow, big one.
That is a big one. So I do compare being a parent sometimes to being a leader. And so a lot of the qualities I have to bring to work, I have to bring to my relationship with my kids. Saying sorry to my team is huge as a leader. Admitting when I've made a mistake and taking ownership for that in front of my team is huge, just like it is when my kids. If I yell, and yes, there are times when I yell because it's been a tremendously long day and nobody's listening and I'm hungry. I take a deep breath. I apologize for that because that is my expectation of their behavior. If they're displaying that they come back and say they're sorry. So I have to role model that. And then we move on. There's no benefit for me continuing to beat myself up about that. But hopefully I've role modeled that you're going to have bad days, you're going to have negative emotions, but this is how we move past them and it doesn't pull us down. And in terms of forgiving yourself, I mean, this is an old analogy, but it's a reason it's been around for so long. If you're on a plane and the air mask comes down, the flight attendant says, if you have a child or an elderly parent with you, put your mask on first and then tend to the child. That is true for everything. If you are not emotionally well or rested, there's no way you can parent effectively.
Right.
You have to, and I plan it out long time, as dorky as that sounds. I look at my calendar a month in advance and I look at, can I take this half day here or there to run some errand or whatever it is, to just, I'm taking next Friday to wrap Christmas presents because I know there's no way I'm going to get that done when the kids are at home or, trying to balance out at work. So I do try and plan those times before it becomes a crisis. So trying to think ahead and knowing it's been a while since I've had some time to myself. It's getting to the point where I'm burnt out. Let me go ahead and schedule something in. So trying to be proactive about those things because we all need it. We all need that downtime to be kind to ourselves. And I think if you're starting from a baseline of taking care of yourself, it's easier to forgive yourself when you make a misstep.
And I found that too, that you may need help. I mean, if you're someone who's grown up in a very unforgiving environment, it's very difficult. And the key is to find someone who gives you. I find that forgiveness, self-forgiveness is a gift. And so if you can find someone who can, if you feel like you're still not in an environment, a very forgiving environment, find someone who can be that person and give you that gift for you. I think that's huge for parents who struggle with that personally in a deep way.
Yep.
That could be a life changer, and there are different ways to accomplish that. But it really, I think for me, is a big approach too. Now another question was about teens. What advice can you give on how I can direct my teen who is easily distracted in involved online schooling, facing poor grades, and I feel a lack of involvement and concern on his part, feel like he's almost taking advantage of the change to allow himself to fail?
Boy, that's the hardest question of the day.
That's a tough one now.
Teens doing online schooling, I have heard stories of just very creative ways to get out of the work or make it look like they're working while they're really gaming or on social media or other things. That is a very specific problem that I would, that might be one where you need someone to talk to, be it a counselor or a parenting coach to help with that specific set of circumstances. I think if they're on the computer, it's always going to be a temptation to kind of do something else. And online schooling doesn't work for every kid. It just doesn't. We have definitely seen that here at Clarity. There's some kids that just don't have the attention span, the self-motivation. And so, is there a way to get them back in some in-person schooling because they need that face-to-face instruction? And we've had kids here that it works great for, that are self-starters and motivators, and they get through all their work in 3 hours and have the rest of their day. But that is not true of all kids. So if you have a teen like that, I think it's working with the school to figure out how to get them additional support, maybe some in-person schooling.
Thank you. And one last question. The person is saying our kids, 15-year-old female and 11-year-old male, are social animals who greatly miss the social interactions with their friends and fellow students. They've been remote learning since last spring. You can see it's starting to wear on them. How can we effectively communicate to them that this current COVID situation won't last forever and motivate them to forge ahead through this unprecedented time?
So I personally think this is one of the biggest negative impacts of this entire pandemic. The term social animals, and that's 100% true. Probably especially for your 15-year-old, peer group is the most important group of people in your life. That's when you're starting to shift from your parents being everything to your friends being everything.
Right.
The fact that we have kind of created this set of circumstances where we've ripped that from them is really hard. I think the last kind of statement in the question is exactly what you should be doing. It's constantly talking about this isn't going to last forever, and then getting creative. Are there some ways? Zoom's not great for all of that, but are they at least doing some kind of social interaction with a group? There's a lot of studies that it's not even one interaction, that kids need that group dynamic. And I've seen creative slumber parties that are done on Zoom, social distancing play dates, or finding the one or two kids in your bubble too that could allow for true social interaction. But you are absolutely right. It is vital for kids. It's part of their developmental need to have that peer interaction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much. Any closing word?
I just think, I know I'm kind of repeating myself, but my mantra through this entire pandemic has really been be kind. Be kind to yourself, be kind to others. There's no roadmap for this, and trying to throw kids in on top of that and make sure that they're navigating it well. Just really take the time to be kind to yourself, kind to each other, kind to your kids, and know that hopefully the end is in sight with a vaccine around the corner.
Thank you, Jessica. Well, this is a wonderful message to close our series of webinar for this time of the year, where we will start again in the spring. And we wish all of you a wonderful holidays. Again, be kind to one another and to yourself as you experience these next few weeks. And take care. Thank you, Jessica, again.
Thank you, Gerard. Take care.